Turning now to President Trump announcing that the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela should be considered closed in its entirety. Trump posting on social media, addressing it to all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers as the Trump administration ramps up pressure against alleged drug cartels.
So it's so crazy that now all of a sudden we are just ramping up so much going on in the Caribbean, in the Pacific. I mean, since the start of this whole, I'm going to say conflict. Is it a conflict yet? 21 strikes on different vessels off the coast of Venezuela, maybe not so much off the coast of Venezuela. I mean, we got kinetic strikes that are happening off the coast, but we also got some that are happening in the Pacific, which is on the other side. And now it's just like we have all these different strikes. They're being publicly displayed. This is on U.S. Southern Command's website. Like, there's just no doubt Venezuela seems to be ramping up very, very quickly. I'm not really sure where this came from. I've said it before. I will say it again. I really do think it's about that oil, baby. I think that, you know, Secretary Hegseth did say that cleaning up the cartels in that area will give the administration more options. And I'm not really sure what that means. But let's just talk about a TikTok about what has happened with Venezuela since the beginning of this administration, actually since before this administration took office in late January. There was a lot going on that I found to be interesting, and I'm just wondering, like, kind of where all this is going to lead to, and indicators why I think that something could be going down within the next 10 to 14 days. Venezuela banned 6 major airlines after tensions with the U.S. escalate. 6 major airlines, a lot of them European, but now banned from their permits revoked. They can no longer fly to Venezuela. Thousands of passengers are now affected. Some folks stranded. I don't know if some people are stuck in Europe. Some people had plans to leave. You know, they are in the southern hemisphere, so they're kind of like entering their spring and summer. And this is when they have a lot of people go to Venezuela, at least they used to, for holiday, for vacation, for all of that good stuff. Here's the strikes that have happened so far. And some strikes happen in multiple places. That's why you don't see 21 dots here. Some of them are in the same general area. But think about this. Venezuela being here on the eastern part of this map in the Caribbean, that kind of makes sense that we have those strikes there. But we have strikes happening in the Pacific Ocean, way off the west coast of Peru, which is something to think about because Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia, all 3 of those countries have had a lot of development by China. China kind of saw this coming. They absolutely have ways to get their soybeans out of South America from those ports down there. So that's something to think about. We got strikes. This strike up here near Mexico, in a different age, I guess in a different world. What I would say, if the Coast Guard saw this boat coming, would they just kill everyone on board? Probably not. They would probably board the vessel and arrest everyone. At least 83 people have been killed so far. And the thing that I've seen from these strikes, at least the videos that I just showed a second ago, is that a lot of them seem to be vessels that maybe necessarily couldn't make it to the United States. Those ones in the Pacific, yeah, probably. But the ones that are in the Caribbean, a lot of them would have to fuel a whole lot of times to make it to the United States. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Here's the TikTok that I really wanted to take a look at. So January 10th, Nicolas Maduro sworn in again for a 3rd term, although the U.S. did reject those results, saying it was a fraud. The U.S. being, this was still under President Biden, that we thought it was fraudulent. I talked to my father-in-law who lives in Venezuela. They down there thought it was fraudulent. The opposition leader, she's still down there fighting. She's ready to be put in there. She's very, very agreeable to the United States. So, that's the first thing. January 28th, the president revokes temporary protected status for 600,000 Venezuelans. So all those folks who came here legally, it was revoked, making them eligible for deportation. Venezuela cooperates with the U.S. on deported migrants. There was a lot of swaps going on in Ecuador. And not in Ecuador, in Nicaragua. And so we have in El Salvador. So we're doing prisoner swaps. They're also accepting the deported migrants directly from the United States. February 26th, Trump cancels Venezuela oil concessions. And then also the 24th of March, imposed a 25% tariff on countries buying Venezuela oil. So he ups the tariff on certain countries that are getting oil from Venezuela. The 8th, they doubled down the award of Maduro's capture to $50 million and labeling him a global terrorist leader. Then September jumps and we start seeing the strikes in the Caribbean. 21 attacks on alleged drug boats that kill at least 83 people. This is starting in September through today. I mean, we still got reported strikes just as a few days ago. October 15th, President Trump authorized the CIA to conduct operations in Venezuela. And then we have October 28th, Venezuela suspends Trinidad and Tobago's gas deal over U.S. warship visit. This is when I think things took a big turn, September, October. And think about being Venezuela, that little island off the coast. If we go back to this map, if you're Venezuela, right where those little dots are, that dot right there at the far northeast, that's Venezuela area. You depend on gas and getting stuff from Venezuela for gas purposes, and you're risking that because you want to help out the United States. I think that's a smart move because, I mean, you know, who's going to be a better ally for you? I would argue to say probably the U.S. November 12th, Venezuela begins nationwide military drills, and they are mobilizing people who are old AF, young AF, and they are starting to move all their Russian-acquired assets into different areas and places just in case they want to try to take out some of our aircraft. November 14th, United States Southern Spear mission is I guess ramped up because it actually came into fruition in January and deploys more troops into near South America. Now we got like almost 12,000 troops there. We have dozens of vessels, nearly, I think, over 100 aircraft in Puerto Rico and different islands in the area. Then the USS Gerald Ford, warships and troops deployed to the Caribbean, the largest vessel in our fleet. Then the USS Federal Administration warns airlines in Venezuelan airspace could be hazardous. So the narrative of narco terrorists, and I'm still waiting to see evidence of that, because on the one hand, I like that drugs are not, possibly could be muted and not coming to the country as often. But on the other hand, I want evidence to just know, to make sure that we're doing everything on the up and up. I don't want our country to be doing war crimes. I'm just not. That gives me an uneasy feeling. And if this really is about drugs, then this could expand even further. Whether we're going to start taking out like the cartels in Mexico, we're going to start doing that. Secretary Hegseth ordered kill everybody in the first Caribbean boat strike. The very first one that we heard about, apparently there was a double tap. Now, we all know that if you're in zombies, you need to double tap, right? You're not trying to get bit and turn yourself into a zombie. But there are examples of where in war, you're supposed to offer quarter if the enemy is no longer able to fight. And so there's an example of a German U-boat taking out a vessel during World War II, and that commander there ordering all the troops to fire upon the sailors that were left. A couple of them survived, and they were put to death. The Nazis were put to death. And some of those Nazis literally were using the excuse that they were just following orders, or they had to take them out because they would reveal the location of that U-boat. And it's similar to some of the things that we're saying now about what's going on in the Caribbean, not comparing us to Nazis. I'm just comparing history, which is, we're saying the reason that we had to double tap that vessel is because of the comms and the navigation was still operable. And so that we had to make that move. And I'm kind of like, maybe not so much. That may be something I want to see more of, but more to come on that. He also says that the U.S. will stop the Venezuela drug trafficking by land soon. It's so crazy that so many people seem to be on board with going on by land. They make it sound like it's just going to be a slam dunk. But when you put troops on the ground, it just significantly increases the warfare. Kinetic strikes are different when they're coming from abroad, coming from the sea, versus putting our troops in harm's way. We already got SEAL Team 6 doing stuff in the Caribbean where after we do a strike, SEAL Team 6 is able to come in and actually inspect the vessels, see if everyone on board is dead. But CIA is apparently already doing operations there. Are we going to start seeing Green Berets and operators and Delta Force going into the country? Are we going to see 11 Bravos from the Army? We're going to see Marines. I'm nervous that a lot of people believe because we're so big and we're so bad that we're just going to just run through Venezuela like it's nothing, and that all the training we've been doing in Panama is enough. And I don't think it's that easy. So the U.S. is linking President Maduro to drug cartels even more. We just named another cartel in Venezuela as a terrorist organization, and he apparently is more tied to that cartel than the first one, the Cartel of the Sun. So it's giving us even more reason to go in there and force regime change. How's that going to go? I'm not quite sure. Here's the thing that I thought could be a turning point. President Trump and President Maduro spoke last week on the phone about a possible meeting in the United States. Now, ain't no way that President Maduro is bringing his ass to the United States and thinking he just going to bounce and go back to the crib. That's not going to happen. I don't know who thought that would be a thing that could possibly happen. They would have to meet in somewhere like Dominica. They would have to meet in some island that neither country owns and neither country has assets in. Like, we don't have CIA there and they don't have their version of Secret Service or CIA there. And I guess it would be a way for him to leave. It just would never happen. The phone call is the only time that they will speak before President Trump were to meet him while he's in handcuffs, being perp walked somewhere in the United States, probably Guantanamo Bay. That's probably about as good as it's going to get. The fact that that phone call only led to us sending more troops, another strike, and after the phone call, President Trump saying we're going to have to handle this by land, lets me know the phone call went nowhere. Other indicators, I believe that this is going to be happening within the next 10 to 14 days. According to Kelly Meyer with News Nation, Southern Command is restricting and limiting leave on Thanksgiving, which was last week, in the Christmas holidays in preparation for possible land strikes. So I've experienced what it feels like to have your leave slowed down and canceled, and you don't know why, especially when you're just a troop. I was in Afghanistan and my grandfather passed away and I was not able to fly back to see him. Now, there's always kind of like this policy, especially when you're in theater, that if the person who passed away is not a direct like parent or brother, sister, or a kid of yours, it's already harder to get leave. But it was even more strict because I didn't know we were about to do a push inside of Afghanistan, and I was needed to write contracts in certain areas in Lashkar. So sometimes you don't know what's coming, but that just gives me an example of I had a death in the family and I couldn't go back to the United States. I'm telling you right now, there's going to be a lot of examples of that with troops in the area. So they're ready to do their mission, because that only motivated me to do a good job, because whatever was going on, it must be important to the point where I'm not allowed to go back to the United States. And these troops are in the same similar boat. The biggest thing that kind of came out recently is Venezuela denounces and condemns. This is their statement. OK, this is translated from Spanish. The colonialist threat seeks to affect the sovereignty of its airspace. This comes after the President Trump calls on their airspace to be closed. He did that earlier today, November 29th, 2025. The Venezuela saying that this is hostile, unilateral, arbitrary act. They cite some stuff from the United Nations. Okay, that's all interesting. But the biggest thing is it's like this is playing out in front of us. A lot of Americans got shit to do. This is the opportune time to do activity like this. People are preparing for the holidays. People are already shopping, hanging out. A lot of people are disconnecting, whether they're taking leave or they're just not necessarily worried about politics. They're not worried about watching the news every day. So a lot of folks have no clue. I talked to my cousins the other day in a group chat. I know that we've done over 20 strikes on vessels in the Caribbean. My cousins knew of 2. One of my cousins knew of none. And they were just wondering, well, what did they do? They being Venezuela, because it's assumed that if the U.S. military flexes and does what they need to do, you did some shit. So it does lead me to believe that my prediction before the end of the calendar year, we will be doing some type of land activity in the United States. So bad Christmas for them. More information for us to learn exactly what this is about. I still personally think it's about that oil, baby. I also think it's about the minerals and all of the everything that could be harvested from the earth in Venezuela. Plus, look at their location. What major areas other than Colombia, we have we have bases there, but what major areas do we have footprint in South America? Not a lot that I know of. So we can be expanding, and maybe we're getting ready to take Antarctica. I don't know. We can't do that. But the point being is, this is serious stuff. Let me know what your comments down below, because me personally, all I'm really thinking about is, do I have everything prepped for if Venezuela feels that they are at a super duper high level of about to be attacked? What do they do to us to try to weaken us? I think that the most that they can do is, number one, cyber attacks. That's why I use Aura. It's not sponsored, but I'll link up who I use to protect myself when it comes to my personal identity and security. Number two, 600,000 Venezuelans came here and they were allowed to be here. Some of them self-deported. Some of them are still here. There has to be a percentage who would be very angry if we go into Venezuela. Could they be activated? I would argue that some could be. All right. And I'm saying this from someone who has a father-in-law that lives in Venezuela. The story he has is that he was a part of the Secret Service. When Maduro took over for his very first term, he was having people that were part of the Secret Service assassinated. My father-in-law went to Trinidad to keep himself safe. But after so many years, he went back to Venezuela because he loves his country. He was willing to risk the fact of being arrested and possibly being killed by President Maduro because he loves his country. And obviously I'm married to his daughter and he loves his grandkids. And if we were to bring him, people like that, where I know my father-in-law would be one that would self-deport and go back if his status was revoked. But everyone else is not like him. Some folks will be very furious and stay loyal to Venezuela. That's just my prediction. So those are things we're thinking about. I really want to know, where does this go? How does this end? But I guess more to come on that. First time stopping by, hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you a part of the battalion. If this is not your first time stopping by, well, thank you once again for watching me run my grape. For everyone else, we'll speak soon.